Take a moment to think, what is the quality that is making you successful at what you do? A quality so strong that you identify with it. Are you a perfectionist? Are you a strategist or a hard worker? But keep this word in mind as we will come back to it later in this talk. The point is that too often we are unaware that by identifying ourselves with a quality, there is a huge price that we may end up paying and great opportunities that are potentially lost. But let me introduce myself. I am a successful corporate executive survivor. I worked for many years for big companies, and at some point I realized that working to exhaustion and frustrating my direct reports were not the only ways of living a meaningful professional life. And I also realized that work can be one of the many dimensions of my life. Duh. So I quit my job, and I had this dream to come back to the corporate world under false pretenses to make a difference. My intention today is to share a couple of things that I've learned about leadership. I mean to propose that leadership is a journey to wholeness, a journey to reclaim the part of ourselves that we learn to disown. And that the best teachers that we could meet in this journey are the people that we detest. I was a successful leader, at least for the corporate standards, of course. And there were some parts of me that were responsible for my success. If I had to give a name to these parts of myself, or this part of my personality, they were the achiever, the pusher, and the pioneer. The achiever wanted me to be successful, to be a leader, to be the best. The pusher knew that I could reach my goal if I worked very hard, if I kept my focus on results, and if I set very high standards for myself and others. And the pioneers, she invited me to be curious about new technologies and, to be open to try always something new. The achiever, the pusher, and the pioneer were really helpful. They served me very well while I became a very successful corporate leader. But let's go back to the reflection that I asked you to make at the beginning. What is the quality that best describes who you are? Are you a pleaser, an entertainer, a smart guy? Each of us has some parts of us responsible for our success. So let me see a show of hands if you find that there are some of the elements here, some of the qualities here that makes who you are. Thank you. Well, each of us have some. In the psychology of selves, these parts of our personality are called, of course, selves. So I'm not suggesting that we suffer from multiple personality disorder, although many corporate leaders look as if they do. I'm just suggesting that rather than thinking of ourselves as being done as a coherent personality, we may think of ourselves as made up of many different parts or selves. Each self functions as a completely independent being with needs, values, and even behaviors. And each self functions as a strategy for help us succeed, reach what we want. And all of these selves, a bunch of those selves, are what we may call I. So each self ultimately is a strategy to fulfill our needs. A bunch of those selves ultimately drive our bus. So they are in the driver's seat while we enjoy the ride in the bus trunk, completely unaware of what happens in the front, until something happens. Around the year 2000, I found that the corporate world was very toxic to me. I've been a single most of the time because guess what? All of my ex-boyfriend had an issue with my achiever. At some point, they all tried to compete with her, and she would never give in. And what about my pusher? He drove my direct report crazy because nobody could live up to his expectations. And my peers were fed up with my pioneer, constantly looking for, changing the way we work, constantly looking for new ways of doing. My life was miserable. And so I decided to quit my last job at Yahoo Europe. And I intuitively knew that I could use my knowledge and background to help leaders go through change. But there was just a little challenge that at the time I completely underestimated. In order to be a masterful coach and facilitator, I had to change first. So little by little, I developed more self-awareness, and I started to know my achiever, my pusher, my pioneer a bit deeper, but also all the other selves in my internal bus. And I also got to know their polar opposites, the selves that I disowned. But let's take it in order. Let me tell you what I've learned about my primary selves, the selves driving my bus. I've learned that I developed those selves since I was a toddler. Imagine that all of humanity originates from the same paddle or source. And within this source, we can find all human needs, values, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And as newborns, our connection to this pond is completely direct. We can access and express completely uninhibited every value and behavior and feeling. So we can be funny, lovable, we can be angry, we can be jealous, we can be generous, we can be everything a human being can be. However, in the process of socialization, we learn how the expression of strong qualities leads to being loved, praised, and rewarded, and the expression of others leads to shame, rejection, and punishment. So wanting to be loved and accepted, we strengthen the selves that are most likely to be rewarded by the people around us, by our caretakers. And we start to neglect, to disown, all the selves that are not wanted by our environment, the selves that are punished or criticized. So I learned that being studious, being smart, and surprising my parents with novelty were all good qualities, whereas being lazy, fail, or giving up were really unwanted by my environment. And so I started to repress those qualities. What about you? What were the qualities that you could safely express in your family and which you had to deny? I began, as everyone does, to identify myself with the qualities that best guaranteed the love and affection of my relatives, and to disassociate myself with the qualities that instead were unwanted. We can call this kind of life-saving parts of ourselves the primary selves. And our ego identifies with those parts of ourselves and declares, this is who I am, but also, this is who I am not. So, identifying ourselves with just a few of ourselves means that we use a very fraction of our potential and believe that that's it, this is who we are. But each self has a twin, a polarity representing the other side of the coin. A part of us that we learn to disown, the part of us that we disassociated ourselves from. For every achiever, there is a part of us that doesn't give a nothing about winning. For every pusher, he is an hedonist. And for every pioneer, there is an oldster. And as the name suggests, disowned selves are largely unwanted because they represent qualities that, or behaviors that used to make us feel unsafe when we were young. Think about one quality that you really, really dislike in others, that you really feel an aversion to. So some of the qualities that people describe as dreadful are manipulative, aggressive, unreliable. So raise your hand if you find at least one characteristic in this list that for you is really hateful. Yeah, okay. Well, let me introduce you to your disowned self. So how many of you are thinking, oh, no way, this is not at all, who I am? Yes? Well, yes, the more we react, the more the self has been buried and repudiated. So disowned selves, we often react with great rejection, with a particular rejection to those particular behaviors that we could not forgive ourselves for. And we managed to hide it so, so well that it hardly ever come to the surface. So either way, we have disassociated this human characteristic from us. We have neglected, separate ourselves from it. So for many years, I couldn't stand social climbers. People getting rewarded for their relationship instead of their skills. And in a nepotistic system like Italy, this led me to hate every other successful person. Now, guess which part of me hated the social climbers? It was my pusher, who had a very strong work ethic and who wanted me to be promoted just because I was the one working the hardest. I still remember when a boss of mine resigned. I immediately thought that the managing director would come to me and offer me the job. I would never, ever have thought of asking for it. It was so obvious that I was the best candidate, right? Well, then I heard that a colleague of mine took the managing director out for lunch and described how she could be a very good fit for the position. And guess what? She took the job. So my pusher became very upset, and he judged the social climber. I will never be like her. Social climbers are wrong, bad people. Well, what was I missing? A teacher of mine always told me, be very careful, because when you point a finger at someone, remember that the other 3 fingers are pointed at you. So why my pusher hated the social climber? Well, in my childhood, for so many years, I've heard my mother accusing successful persons of not deserving their success or their position because they got it thanks to the friendship with this or that person in power. Maybe she was just jealous. Maybe she was the fox despising the grape. But the brain of a child is not sophisticated enough to make a distinction between reality and assumptions. So what I've learned is that being promoted not for the hard work was very criticized by the person whose love I needed the most. And so I completely denied the access to this energy and the constructive quality of this self. But if we look at the social climber and we remove the judgment of my pusher, so we remove the labeling, what is the quality of this self or this characteristic that if I had taken just a little bit of it would have completely changed the game for me? would have allowed me to take the job if I just taken just a little bit of her quality. I would have developed the skills for asking for what I want and need. So this process of becoming aware and embracing the qualities of my disowned selves provided me with choice. I can work hard and expect that people, notice and reward my successes, and I can ask for what I want as well. I'm not identified with just one side of the coin. I'm not the pusher. I'm not the social climber, but I can access either energies. They are all available to me. And I can even modulate them so I can decide to have a little bit of that or a little bit more of that other one. And this is why the people that we detest are our best teachers, because they mirror those parts of ourselves that we learn to disown. And they show us the way to discover what we can reintegrate, reclaim for ourselves. So the 3 steps to accept and embrace our disowned selves are noticing what we dislike about others, removing the judgment, and taking in just a little bit of the quality. If you are present in the moment during the encounters with the people that we dislike, well, we may be ready to reclaim what has been ours all along, part by part, self by self. Well, the impact of this journey of selves awareness was very huge to me. First of all, I got a husband, a soulful man with whom I can share my life in full partnership. Second, as I took just a little bit of the laid-back self, I can relax and trust my coaches and associates in my organization. And in return, they feel really engaged and appreciated. And finally, as I took a little bit of the traditionalist, I can also relax and enjoy what if, instead of unrelentlessly ask myself, what if? So my wish for you is that you learn to embrace all your many selves, the primary and the disowned, and that you disidentify with both of them, so that in each moment you can choose the most appropriate energy and be at the driver's seat of your bus. And also my wish is that you become leaders who have access to the full spectrum of humanness. Thank you.